on, there are 4 chambers in the heart, right? 4 chambers. What are the chambers? So if you, again, are not familiar with the way that I teach, I just want to express to you, when I cover NCLEX information or even class information, I sometimes tell you this is need to know things, and these are good to know and need to know, must know, right? So anything that I have in red is usually good to know. And it's good to know because it helps you understand the information that you must know, right? It helps shed more light to it. So I usually put it in red so I can tell you they're probably on the NCLEX, because remember, there's a difference. There are some of you who are probably in nursing school, and there's some of you who are done and who are going to take the NCLEX. As you know, they're going to test you on different things. In school, they test you more on content, right? And in NCLEX is more on practicality, like practice, right? So the things that you necessarily need to know for your nursing class is not necessarily the same things that you need to know for your NCLEX class. And that's how I help distinguish with you, or to you, what those are. So knowing the chambers is something that you need to know for your class exam, but knowing how many chambers are there is not something they're going to test you on the NCLEX, right? But it is, you need to know that so that when you are asked other questions that are more practical about nursing practice, right, then you'll understand how to answer it, right? Okay, so there are 4 chambers. There's a right atrium, and there's a right ventricle, there's a left atrium, left ventricle, right? But let's go according to what we see here. It says the right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the superior and inferior vena cava, right? So your heart is right here, okay? So now, being that it's here, it's not really in the center, but it's not at the top or the bottom. So it needs to bring blood. Oh, so before I continue, the heart has what we call the plumbing system, and it has the electrical system. And at this moment, we're going into the plumbing system, right? So plumbing, as you know, like there's like a reservoir, right? Where the water collects and then it gets distributed, right? So your heart is kind of like that. It collects all the blood. But in order to collect it, it's collecting it from the top and it's collecting it from the bottom. They are different arteries that bring the blood to the heart, right? So anything that's coming from the brain and the top up here, up top of the heart, is coming into the heart through the superior vena cava. Makes sense. Superior, it's above, it's higher. And anything that's coming from the organs and the legs and toes and hands and such, they're gonna come from the inferior vena cava or vena cava, whichever way you want to say it. And so it's below the heart, and that's all that means, right? So none of them are superior or inferior or better than the other. It's just the location that it's in reference to. But then again, if you think about the brain, it is superior to everything. So then I guess that's why it's superior, right? But anyway, the blood has to come both from the top and the bottom of the body. And when it gets into the heart, both top and bottom, it's coming without any oxygen, right? Because the body has used up whatever oxygen that it had, and it's collecting it to go to the heart, right? So it's only going to deposit it in the right atria, right? Or right atrium. So once it goes to the right atrium, then it gets to the right ventricle, right? So from the right atria to the right ventricle. But from the right atria to the right ventricle, right, it has to pass a valve, right? And we mentioned the valves is in the endocardium, right? And this is something else that I want you to do too. As you study, I want you to always reconnect information, right? Don't just learn new information independent of each other, but revisit the others, like the ventricles, yeah, that's the endocardium. So if anything happens to the ventricles, that's an endocardium issue, right? Or I'm sorry, if anything happens to the valves, that's an endocardium issue. That way you kind of like keep repeating information in your mind. Remember, with repetition, you have the memory is jogged and it stores information, right? Okay, so from the right atrium to the right ventricle, we have a valve, right? And I don't want to mess up on the valves to say which is which. So we have the tricuspid valve and we have the mitral valve, and I always forget. So the tricuspid has 3 3 cups to it, and that's why it's called a tricuspid. And the mitral has, no, the mitral has 3. I always forget which one has which, but I know the mitral is on the left side, right? And the tricuspid is on the right side. So we have that. So, but we'll get there. But just know that in between the right atrium and the left ventricle, there are valves, and they open in one direction, right? So the blood from the atrium goes to the ventricles. So now the blood from the ventricles have to go to the lungs to go get oxygen, right? And so it has, in order for it to leave the ventricle, it has to pass through another valve where, and this one is like called the semilunar, and it goes up to the lungs to collect oxygen, right? Once it leaves, so let's move on to the next one. So then it goes to the lungs. When it comes from the lungs, that's when it goes to the left atrium. And then from the left atrium, it goes to the left ventricle. And then from the left ventricle, it goes to the aorta, which is the largest artery in the whole body. And then it goes to the body. Okay, so this pathway of the heart is something that you need to know. If you're in school right at the moment, they will test you on it for sure, right? And if you're in NCLEX, they won't test you exactly on what it is, what the steps are, but you need to know them to answer questions, right? Because you'll need to know when there's a damaged area, where that blood is going to go back to. When we talk about heart failure, is it right side or is it left side, right? If we're talking about right or left, or then we know the right atrium and the left and the right atrium and the right ventricles have a problem. We need to know, where is that problem going to affect, right? And since we said, well, we didn't say, but valves are one directional. I think I did say that. But so meaning that if there's a problem, it's only gonna go bad in one direction. And what it's gonna do is the blood is gonna go back to where it came from. So and again, we're not there yet, but I do want to introduce the idea of, if there is an issue with your heart, that you will have a problem with where the blood is coming from, right? And that's why it's important to know the pathway of the blood, right? For example, if you had a problem with the left side, I said that the blood was collected from the lungs, because that's where it went. From the right side, it went to the lungs, and then from the lungs, it came to the left atria, to the left ventricle, right? And so when the left side has a problem, it's going to go back to where it came from. It's going to back up. It's going to go back to the lungs. And that's why you're going to have left-sided heart failure, or you're going to have lung issues with like crackles or wheezing, or, well, not mostly wheezing, crackles, because it's going to be filled with fluid. And then you're going to have issues like you can't breathe and all of that stuff, right? So knowing the pathway is important. So again, we said the left atrium. Now, you said it receives oxygenated blood, right? Why? Because it's coming from the lungs. It collected oxygen. The left side is, now we said, anytime it's moving from one chamber to the next chamber, it has to go through a valve, right? And it's important to know those valves, because they can have problems too. Every part of the body can develop an issue. If it's a valve issue, then you need to know which valve is having a problem, right? Is it the semilunar valve? Is it the mitral valve? Is it the tricuspid valve? Okay, let's pause for a minute and let's talk about the left and the right. Is there one side that's worse than the other? Or the atrium and the ventricles, is there a problem that's worse than the other? And the answer is yes, there is. If you were to look at the heart, a picture of the heart, I don't think I can pull it up since you guys are, let's see, really quickly. I can tell you, but I'm visual, so hold on, guys. Let me see. I'm only seeing pictures of that. Okay, here we go. Okay, so when we see this here, let's take this picture for example. So the way it is, the way the heart is, the left side of the heart is bigger than the right side when it's sectioned off. This is not sectioned off, but when it's sectioned off, the left side is bigger, right, than the right side. Also, when you look at where the atrium is and the size of the atrium compared to the ventricles have a bigger space than the atrium, right? So I say this to tell you that when you have a problem with the heart, that's a ventricular problem, that's more serious and detrimental than if you had a problem with the atria, right? And also, same problem if you had a problem with the left side, it's going to be more problematic than the right side, only because it's affecting your lungs and you can't breathe, right? The right side's problem is more going to go back to the body. You're going to have everything's going to swell up, right? Swelling is not going to be as bad as I can't breathe, right? So just wanted to have you understand that. So we already spoke about the left is the largest and most muscular chamber. It receives oxygenated blood. We already mentioned why it receives oxygenated blood, because it's coming from the lungs, right? The left atrium pumps blood into the systemic circulation via the aorta. Systemic circulation meaning back to the body, that circulates the blood through everything, my eyes, my toes, my nails, everything, right? From the atria, right? While I'm talking about this, I just want to make a mention of the idea behind ventricles and or veins and arteries, right? Because the aorta is a huge artery. So it's the biggest artery. But the idea too that I wanted to come across is it pumps really fast and really strong, and that which is a little different from veins, which are slower, right? And that's why when a person cuts, an artery here, they die really quickly because the blood. I'm sorry, they're doing work in the house and you hear the noise. I apologize for that. But when they cut the artery, they can bleed out because the artery bleeds much faster and pumps much more strongly than the veins, right? So we need to remember this aorta is really serious and really important. And we'll learn some more attributes about the aorta that can affect other things like the blood pressure, right? Or how much blood flow is actually being pumped. Okay, so moving on, we can talk about the different valves, right? The different valves we have. Actually, I'm going to pause here just a few because it's 2:30. I want to know if anyone has any questions before I continue. For more information on how to register for classes and get help from our tutoring center, visit www.gabnicnursingtutor.com. That is www.gabnicnursingtutor.com. To view our free or paid classes, sign up on www.thinkific.com. That's www.thinkific.com and register for the pre-recorded classes of your choice after searching for the Gab-Nic Tutoring Center uploads. We offer in-person tutoring and Zoom calls. You can also find us on YouTube for more free classes and tips on how to do better in nursing. We are also on Facebook, where we upload articles, tips, and tricks on how you can make your journey to becoming a nurse smooth and near effortless. Did I mention Instagram? Basically, we are everywhere. So check us out or call 917-602-9927 and we will tell you just how to join. See you soon!